Okay, hi everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about why I think Claude and ChatGPT and all these other AI tools really struggle with Jest testing. For those of you who haven't watched any of my videos currently, basically what I'm doing is I'm starting a new startup and I'm building it from scratch, 100% public, recording absolutely everything we do. Now, I don't have an idea at the moment. I don't know what idea or application it is that we're building. So I've decided to start by building the user login registration authentication piece. So far what we've got is we've built out all of this functionality that exists here. So we can register a user, we can log in as a user, we've got email verification, we've got forgot password functionality, and we've also added multi-factor authentication via email as well. Now this is our code base, so all of this code's largely been written by AI because I'm trying to do it in a way where, although I do know how to code, I'm not a full-time developer and I want to see if AI can work quicker than I can. In one of my previous videos, we asked AI to review our code base and give a recommendation in terms of the amount of time. It recommended that so far with what we've written, it would be about 12 to 16 days of effort. And so far I've spent probably about 12 hours. So let's just call it 2 days working on this. So at the very least, it's 3 times quicker, perhaps 5 or 6 times quicker, really, when it comes to it. But what I want to do is I want to explain a little bit why I think AI and with the tools that we're using, ChatGPT and Claude predominantly, is having so much trouble with our Jest testing. If you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that we've got Jest tests and they're constantly failing, they're constantly getting errors, and it largely comes down to the fact that AI doesn't understand our whole code base. So what I mean by that is our app, if you haven't followed along, is using Node.js on the back end with Express. So let's give this a color. It's a bit, make it a little bit more opaque. So basically in our Node.js application, maybe we put that here, Node. Whoa, why is that so tiny? Let's make this like 80. Make this bigger. Node.js with Express v5. Just so if you're familiar with Express, a lot of my experience was with version 4. Version 5 is still in beta, but it's pretty much about to be released. And with a Node.js and Express application, basically what you have is you've got your routes. And these are your API endpoints, so / login, for example. Then from your routes, you have what's called your controllers. And what your controllers are is really, I guess, the way of processing requests, processes requests. All right, so if we go from our route, so let's make this a little bit thicker. That didn't work. I want this to be okay, cool. And then what our controllers do is, like they're the first part that kind of say, okay, we've got an incoming request, we've got someone who's providing us, in this case for login, their email and password. What do we do with this information? So what in our code base, what we've done is we've extrapolated out some of that functionality into services file. Now, some people do all of the functionality just directly in the controller. It still works, obviously, but for best practice and reusability, you put your business logic, or more accurately, I guess, complex business logic, in your services file. And that's because you can then reuse it across, you might have multiple controllers that call a similar service or the same service, and then you can reuse it, right? Instead of having to cut and paste your code into multiple controls. Then on top of that, once the service is finished with whatever has happened, it passes the result back to the controller to then pass the response back to the end user. So maybe we should have like, our end user is here, and they've performed, right, some action that, so we should go, can you write here? Perform, no, can't. Perform an action, right, i.e. login. So this user has performed an action such as logging in. Make that a little bit smaller. Well, not that small. Well, not that big. Oh my god. They perform an action, hits a route such as login, goes to the controller, which processes the request. It can call services which do the complex logic, passes the result back to the controller, and then the controller responds back to the user with, hey, login success, right? For example. Just going to delete that line there just to clean this up a little bit, but I hope you get the idea. Then, so far, this is fairly straightforward, right? And if we ask AI to create tests around this logic, we basically have 3 files that it has to consider, and it would do a pretty good job. Where things get a little bit more complex, though, is you don't actually, in real life, it doesn't actually operate in this way, 100%. So what we have is we've got middleware. And for example, these are things like, our authorization or authentication. Actually, if we go to our file, I'll show you this. If we go to middleware, we've got like authentication, right? So we're checking the header to see if the user already has a token. If they have a token, then they're logged in and they can proceed with, calling an API endpoint, for example, to get their tasks back or whatever it is. We've got our error handling middleware. So we've got all of this different functionality. So if we just do like 2 of these, handling, and maybe instead of the action for login, we'll say like get tasks, because you're not going to be authenticated. You're not going to have a token in your authentication middleware if you haven't logged in. So we'll just change this to make this more get tasks, for example. So the user wants to get their tasks. They hit this endpoint, and this first of all is going to check, are they authenticated? Then if they're not authenticated, it actually might then call your error handling middleware, which might then say, back to the user, hey, you're not logged in. Assuming they are logged in, assuming they are logged in and authenticated correctly, it might then go back to our controller, which then passes it to our service logic. In addition to this, though, we might also have another set of files, which are our utils. So we'll put these over here, and we'll change this like green, and then we will go to our utils folder. And we can see like we've got some email validation, we've got our app error, we've got our email service, we've got some error types, we've got some logging functionality. So in the services logic, we might be calling a util, and let's just say this is our email service. So maybe it's like someone wants to get their tasks, and there's some form of notification email or something that whenever they get their tasks, it sends a notification to them. I don't know. Just an example. But equally, this services logic might also call our error handling, which might also pass an error back here. And then we also have, as you saw here in our utils, we've got this error constructor. So we've also kind of got like another util, which kind of maybe sits over here. Error, which our error handling leverages in certain situations. Go to sorry, we're calling it's from our error types, not app error. So let's just do that. Sorry, we'll change this to error types so we're accurate. Now, this isn't 100%. accurate for our particular situation. Like, we're not getting tasks yet, we've just built the user registration and login functionality. But you can see now, compared to a simplistic use case where we're just doing like these three processes, hitting an API endpoint, doing some processing of that request, and then performing our business logic before we send back the result. Now we've got all these different pieces of the puzzle. So when we ask Jest to do a test, for example, we've been asking it to write the tests to check our login functionality. It, for example, was saying, well, if a user doesn't log in, we want to return an error that says, unable to log in due to incorrect password. But if we go to, for example, our error types, we can see we've got all these different error types. And then we've got this error util, which has, also looks at those error types. So if it's a validation error, we've then also got, like in our email validation, if it's an email validation error, we've got, all these messages. So because because Claude and ChatGPT struggle to take account of all of this functionality, when you ask it to create some Jest tests, it's kind of like going path of least resistance. So it's like looking at these things, and then you tell it, hey, no, you forgot, we've got this piece of middleware. So then it tries to rewrite them again. It's like, oh no, hey, this piece of middleware, if there's an error, it calls this piece of middleware, and this piece of middleware also uses our utils for error types. So there's just like so much complexity happening. And then even with Claude, what we were trying to do is give it some instructions. We have Claude open. We're trying to give Claude some instructions to explain, where is it? Our error handling, and say like, this is how our error handling is meant to work. And even with this, it was still struggling. So look, I want to wrap the video there. It's just, I guess, like a simplified explanation of why I think AI is really struggling with our Jest testing. So that's something that we've got to solve, because it's taking way too long. It's taking me more time to write the tests with AI than it is to write the actual functionality, and I want to get this to work. So lots more testing coming up so we can try and figure this out, but that's just an explanation as to why I think AI struggles so much with testing. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.